Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a Sunday late afternoon episode of Ted's Booze Cellar with me, your most gracious host, Ted. Welcome to the premier alcohol review show here on YouTube. Today we're going to be taking a look at a beer from one of our, I guess you could call them frenemies, in the form of Brewdog. And Brewdog are a bit of a weird one because they do make some generally high quality beers, and their product design is generally pretty good. As you can see on this can here of today's drink, Candy Kittens, the colours are really nice and I really like the way that they stand out against each other. But then with Brewdog you also have a lot of bad. So obviously, as many of you will have seen in the last couple of years, they have had some considerable controversies, and on top of that, the design of their cans, while usually including a lot of colours that are quite nice, do tend to have designs that are a little bit corporate and somewhat cold, as you can see here. And to be honest with you, this kind of extends to their beers as well, because their beers generally tend to play around with a lot of interesting concepts, such as including beers with flavours that may not necessarily be associated with those types of beers. So that could be quite interesting, but at the same time, the actual practical results from that do tend to vary amongst quite a lot of Brewdog's beers and those of their partners as well. Any of you who have remembered my Jasmine Flower Pilsner video will be able to attest to that. But today we're going to be taking a look at something that might actually be not too bad. So we're going to be taking a look today at Brewdog's Candy Kittens Eat and Mess NEIPA, which is an Eat and Mess flavoured New England IPA. Now, I wanted to kind of get a bit more of a grasp on what an NEIPA is, so I looked on the website Beer and Biceps. It just says here that NEIPAs are very similar to West Coast IPAs in that they are heavily hopped and often quite strong. The main difference is in appearance. The beers are hopped quite late in the brewing process, and as such the beers tend to be very hazy. Often an NEIPA beer appears like orange juice, very thick and almost pulpy in appearance. They can be bitter, but often an NEIPA will have minimal bitterness in taste, letting the fruit flavours stand out. Now, that's a pretty good description of the beer, but unfortunately I can't really find much information in terms of how it stands out in terms of its finer details, in terms of the taste and mouthfeel, as compared to something like a West Coast IPA. But I don't know, I suppose we'll see by actually drinking it, and to be fair, I'm actually quite looking forward to this because it's a 6%er, so it could be quite strong. I did also have a look on the Brewdog website as well, and they said on there that it is flavoured with a mouthfeel of being smooth, along with flavours of raspberry and guava, which, yeah, I guess those could mix. For our latest collaboration beer, we have teamed up with Candy Kittens, who have been shaking up the sweet game for the past decade. Our liquid tribute to the gourmet gummies is just as big on flavour as its inspiration. The beer pours bright pink with notes of tropical guava and ripe raspberry spilling from the glass. The mouthfeel is full-bodied, juicy and smooth. Bitterness is low, with fresh hops working wonders alongside a hint of sweetness for this triumph of crafted confectionery. It says here it's got a mid-high hoppiness, it's got a low-mid bitterness, and it's got a mid maltiness as well. And it's got ingredients of water, malted barley, torrefied wheat, yeast, malted oats, hops, natural flavourings, and then concentrate of elderberry and blackcurrant? Wait, it's flavoured with elderberry and blackcurrant, but the flavour they say on the initial profile is raspberry and guava. Huh. Weird. Anyway, we'll see how this beer properly tastes like once we've sniffed and tasted it, so let's give it a proper snifter to see what our first impressions are like. I think for the can as well, I'm probably going to give it like an 8 out of 10. Like I said before, I just think that the design and some of like the line work is just a bit cold, corporate and bland, but it doesn't look too bad. But let's have a quick sniff of it in the can to see what our first impressions are like anyway. Yeah, not much of a bodied nose, really. Just kind of underwhelming. It's kind of this sort of stale, hoppy nose with a slight tint of artificial fruit. It's not bad, it's just very underwhelming. So I'll give the nose in the can like a 4.5 out of 10. It doesn't smell great, but it's not like it's a bad nose per se. You can stand it. Let's see here. Interesting colour actually though. Whoops. Yep, forgot this was an NEIPA, so I have completely screwed up the head there. Admittedly, I'm a bit better at pouring lagers and stouts than I am IPAs, I'll be honest. So, yeah, that's not great. Oh, dear. But again, this video and this series, well, it's nothing if not a bit amateur, really, let's be honest. So, yeah, let's have a quick sniff of it in the glass. Let's see what our Okay, it's just a little bit less harsh in the glass, to be honest, but that actually kind of lets the rest of the flavours stand out a bit more. So in the glass, it's like a 6. It's actually quite nice. It's got a bit of a creamy after smell, actually, which is very pleasant. But yeah, it's nothing amazing. But it is a good nose in the glass, actually. I will give it that. So yeah, 6 out of 10 in the glass, and then 4.5 out of 10 in the can, I think. Anyway, as always, we won't really know what the sucker properly tastes like until we have our court-mandated palate cleanser. And then on to the most important part of the video, which is to see what this sucker tastes like. So to everyone at home, I hope you have a good bank holiday Monday, and I hope you have a good rest of the week ahead. Enjoy that 4-day week, you hear? And as always, drink responsibly. And let's see what this sucker tastes like. Okay, you know what? In contrast to the last few Brewdog beers I've had, this is actually pretty alright. This is actually quite good. Yeah, I was afraid this would be either too sweet or just a complete mishmash of like hops and barleys just mixing together like a lot of craft IPAs do. But generally this is pretty well balanced. It does actually have a bit of a smooth texture, perhaps not as quite as smooth as they were saying, but it does complement the creamy aspects of the flavour really, really well. So the first thing that does stand out to me about the texture is admittedly how smooth it is, but it does have this underlying thin wateriness to the texture that kind of does dilute some of the flavour a little bit and does kind of distract a bit from the finer parts of the flavour. I do feel that the texture is slightly weaker than the flavour in that sense, but generally it's not too bad. It's a little bit sparkly from the fizz. It's generally quite smooth. It complements the type of flavour we've got here really, really well. So I will say that the texture, while not great, does complement the flavour really, really well. So the flavour itself then is a slightly candied, kind of raspberry-ish flavour. There is admittedly a little bit of the guava there in the aftertaste, and actually I do almost get like a very, very minute hint of blackcurrant, but I'm kind of glad that it's just only a minor hint, because I feel like that's quite strong flavour in there, but there's only a very mild bit of it, so it kind of more so kind of undercuts everything with a little bit of tart sweetness. I feel like if there was more of it, it would kind of spoil the flavour, because that guava-y aftertaste along with the raspberry-ish initial main bit of the flavour that kind of bursts in there would be kind of ruined if there was too much of another thing. I think like essentially having 2.5 flavours is kind of the way to go with this kind of thing, and especially the way that this NEIPA base kind of tastes. I feel like that having more than 2 full-bodied flavours and 1 sort of semi-bodied flavour is probably the best way to go, because I feel like any more and you kind of overcomplicate, because I feel like any more and you'd probably risk overcomplicating it and just kind of spoiling the flavour. And yeah, there's definitely this kind of like juiciness to it. It's kind of quite light and fruity, and you'd think with it being a beer based off of Eton Mess it'd be kind of like quite sweet and rich, but it's really not. It's quite smooth, refreshing, light, tasty beer that has a admittedly somewhat underwhelming texture that does kind of complement the flavour really well, and a flavour that, while lacking full-bodied aspects in the 2 main flavours, still has enough flavour and full-bodiedness overall from the separate flavours that are there to kind of complement it. So I feel like while this isn't a super strong beer, it's definitely a beer that has parts that make up a greater story, so if that makes sense. So yeah, I definitely feel like this is a beer where the individual aspects are not great on their own, but combined together they do actually make something quite nice. So I'll say a 7.25 out of 10. It's good, it's not blowing my mind, but it's actually a lot better than I thought it would be, and I probably would get it again. I think I got it for £3.75 from Sainsbury's, and while I don't think it's quite that much, I do think it's in the region of maybe being about £2 to £2.50, or maybe getting on for £2.75. But generally speaking, I think that this is actually a really good beer. It's one of Brewdog's best beers for a while, and yeah, I would actually probably go out of my way to get this again if I wanted something like this. So yeah, definitely recommend this if you're into that sort of thing. But as always, if you guys liked this video, leave a like, share and subscribe. If you have any suggestions for future episodes of Ted's Booze Cellar, let me know in the comment section down below, as well as any other video formats and drinks you want me to review in the future. I am going to be doing some history of videos on certain types of drinks and certain brands and stuff like that in the future, so that's going to be something that I'm going to be doing. The first one of those, I think, is I'm going to be doing a history of on Carlsberg Special Brew. So yeah, that should be quite interesting. But as always, if you guys want to check out my other stuff online, I'll leave the links to all that in the video description down below. And until next time, have fun, stay safe with whatever you're doing, don't do anything I wouldn't do, drink responsibly, know your limits, and I'll see you guys at the bar next time on Ted's Booze Cellar. Bye-bye for now. I feel like, yeah, the sum is greater